The salty wind whipped Sarah's hair around her face as she scrambled up the crumbling steps of the lighthouse. The air was thick with the scent of brine and decay, a constant reminder of the dark history of the place. The old lighthouse, once a beacon of hope for sailors, now loomed over the rugged coastline like a silent sentinel, its secrets buried deep within its stone walls. The chase had been relentless, a desperate pursuit through the labyrinthine corridors of the lighthouse. The killer, a shadow in the flickering lamplight, had led her on a twisted path, his every move calculated to disorient her. With each echoing step, the tension coiled tighter in her gut. The clock ticked, a relentless countdown to the final act of revenge. Sarah glanced over her shoulder, the flickering beams of her flashlight cutting through the inky blackness. The killer was close. She could feel his chilling presence like a cold breath on her neck. She pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest, her senses heightened. Each creaking floorboard, each groan of the ancient structure, was a potential harbinger of his approach. She navigated through narrow passageways, the stench of mildew and salt clinging to the air. Time seemed to warp and twist, each second an eternity, as she desperately sought an escape. The lighthouse, once a symbol of hope, had become a prison of shadows, a monstrous entity consumed by the darkness within. The chase led her up winding stairs, each step a monumental effort. The air grew heavy, the silence broken only by the rasping of her own breaths and the rhythmic pounding of her heart. The spiral staircase seemed to stretch endlessly, a cruel test of her endurance. The killer's laughter echoed in her ears, a chilling melody that sent shivers down her spine. Finally, she reached the top, emerging onto the observation platform. The wind howled like a banshee, its icy fingers clawing at her face. The night sky stretched above, a vast canvas of glittering stars, but Sarah barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the shadowy figure standing at the edge of the platform, his silhouette outlined against the horizon. He turned, his face illuminated by a single twisted grin. The lamplight glinted off the glint in his eyes, a chilling reflection of the madness that consumed him. His voice, a venomous whisper, cut through the wind. "You think you can stop me, Sarah? You think you can undo the past?" His words were a mocking echo of her own relentless pursuit of truth. He held a long, sharp knife, its blade glinting in the darkness. The air crackled with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Sarah took a step forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You're wrong. You can't run from the consequences of your actions. This ends tonight." The killer laughed, a harsh, grating sound that sent chills down her spine. "This isn't about consequences. It's about justice, about making them pay for what they did." His words were a twisted testament to his obsession, a warped sense of morality that had consumed him. He was a man possessed, driven by an insatiable thirst for revenge. A silent struggle ensued. The air crackled with desperation as Sarah grappled with the killer, her every move a desperate attempt to disarm him, to save herself. The fight was brutal, a primal dance of survival, her adrenaline surging through her veins. She fought back, her determination fueled by her unwavering belief in justice. She parried his attacks, her movements fueled by a desperation to break free from his clutches. Each blow was a testament to her will, a testament to her refusal to succumb to fear. The battle raged, a blur of limbs and shadows, the sound of their clashing steel echoing in the vast expanse of the lighthouse. Sarah's mind raced, searching for a way out, a way to break free from his grip. Then, with a desperate lunge, she managed to dislodge the killer's grip on the knife. It flew through the air, landing with a clatter on the rough stone floor of the observation platform. She scrambled back, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The killer stood there, his face contorted with rage. He had lost his weapon, his final tool of revenge. The fury in his eyes was palpable, a testament to the rage that had consumed him for so long. "You've made a mistake, Sarah," he snarled. "This isn't over." His words were a chilling promise, a veiled threat that lingered in the air. Sarah knew that the battle wasn't over, but she had won a crucial victory. She had disarmed him, she had broken his hold, and she had given herself a chance to escape. She didn't hesitate. With a surge of adrenaline, she scrambled to the edge of the observation platform, her eyes fixed on the ladder leading down to the safety of the lighthouse. The wind whipped around her, threatening to pull her off the ledge. The killer lunged, his outstretched hand reaching for her, but Sarah was already moving, her body a blur of motion as she clambered down the ladder. The descent was a terrifying plummet, the darkness of the lighthouse enveloping her like a suffocating blanket. She reached the bottom, her legs trembling with exhaustion, her body aching from the struggle. She stumbled back, gasping for air, her heart pounding in her chest. She was safe, for now. The killer was still up there, but she had managed to escape his grasp. Sarah glanced up at the silhouette of the killer standing on the observation platform, his figure outlined against the backdrop of the starry sky. She knew that he would be waiting for her, that this was only the beginning of the end. The lighthouse, a symbol of hope, had become a battlefield, and the battle for truth had just begun. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Sarah emerged from the lighthouse, her body battered, but her spirit unbroken. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The killer may have escaped, but she had managed to prevent another life from being extinguished, another soul from being claimed by his twisted game. She had disarmed him. She had exposed his secrets, and she had shown him that even in the darkest corners of the world, the light of truth could prevail. The air hung thick with the scent of salt and fear. Sarah stood at the precipice of the old lighthouse, the wind whipping her hair around her face. The waves crashed against the rocks below, their rhythmic roar a constant reminder of the relentless force of nature, mirroring the storm raging within her. Before her, in the heart of the decaying structure, the figure of the killer stood bathed in the flickering light of a single oil lamp, his silhouette a menacing mockery of justice. The lighthouse, once a beacon of hope for mariners, was now a symbol of darkness, the perfect setting for the culmination of a twisted game of revenge. Sarah knew that every step closer was a gamble, but she couldn't stand back and watch another life vanish in the shadow of the 7-day killer's reign. "You did this," she said, her voice barely audible against the gale. "All those lives lost because of a past you couldn't let go of." The killer chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that echoed through the lighthouse. "Past? I'm living with the past, Sarah. Every day, every moment. It's a torment I can't escape. But I'm making sure no one else gets to forget what happened here, what was taken from me." He took a step forward, his shadow lengthening like a specter reaching out to consume her. "I saw them all, the young people who died that night, their faces contorted in fear, their screams echoing through the storm. I saw the keeper, the man who was supposed to protect them, standing there, doing nothing. Nothing." His voice hardened, each word laced with venom. "He wasn't a victim, Sarah. He was a monster who took everything from me, everything I loved." "He was dead, you know?" Sarah said, her voice rising with a mix of anger and desperation. "He didn't choose to be there. And the others, they were innocent. They didn't deserve this." The killer turned, his eyes burning with a dark intensity that chilled Sarah to the bone. "They were at the lighthouse that night, weren't they? All of them. He took them away from me, so now I take them away from the world." "You can't escape the past by destroying the present," Sarah argued, her voice trembling but firm. "What you're doing is wrong. It's madness." You're hurting so many people, and for what? The killer's gaze flickered towards the oil lamp, its flame casting grotesque shadows on the weathered walls of the lighthouse. For justice, Sarah. Justice for those who died that night, for the ones who will never know peace, never know love. Justice for me. He took another step closer, his breath forming a white cloud in the frigid air. I've waited years for this, Sarah. Years to make them pay. Years to punish those who watched as my world fell apart. Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had tried to reason with him, to make him see the futility of his actions. But he was trapped in a labyrinth of pain, a prisoner of his own twisted justifications. She knew that words wouldn't change him, wouldn't bring back the lives he had taken. The only way to stop him now was to confront him directly, to fight for survival, to protect the innocent lives he sought to extinguish. Sarah's gaze met his, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "This ends now," she said, her voice a whisper but firm. "The 7 days are over." The killer laughed, a sound as cold as the wind that whipped around them. "You think you can stop me, Sarah? You think you can stand against the storm?" He lunged forward, his eyes blazing with the fire of his insanity. Sarah was ready. She had prepared for this moment, every instinct honed to survive this final showdown. A struggle ensued, a blur of movements and desperate cries, as the killer's rage collided with Sarah's determination. The lighthouse, a silent witness to the tragedy that unfolded within its walls, trembled with the force of their fight. The oil lamp knocked from its precarious perch, shattered on the wooden floor. The flames devoured the remaining oil, painting the room in an eerie orange glow. The walls, scarred by time and the echoes of countless storms, seemed to echo the violence that raged within the lighthouse's heart. Sarah, her body aching with the exertion, stumbled back, her gaze fixed on the killer's face, contorted in a mask of hatred. He lunged again, but Sarah was ready. She dodged, her arm twisting around his neck, the air escaping his lungs with a gasp. He grappled with her, his fingers like steel claws digging into her flesh. But Sarah held on, her strength fueled by desperation, by the fear that fueled his insanity. She felt his body growing limp, the rage draining from his eyes. The killer crumpled to the floor, his body a lifeless heap. Sarah, panting heavily, her heart pounding in her chest, finally allowed herself to breathe. She had won. The 7-day killer, the monster who had haunted the city for weeks, was finally silenced. She stood above him, his face twisted in a final expression of anguish, a testament to the dark legacy of the lighthouse. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, the weight of the ordeal pulling at her like a heavy anchor, but a sense of relief mingled with the weariness, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. She had faced the storm and survived. The city, battered but not broken, was finally free. The lighthouse, a silent witness to the horror, stood as a reminder that the darkness could never truly extinguish the light, that justice, however painful the path, would ultimately prevail. The air hung thick with the scent of salt and fear, as Sarah cautiously made her way through the labyrinthine corridors of the abandoned lighthouse. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending shivers down her spine. Each creaking step echoed ominously in the cavernous space, amplifying the tension that coiled tight in her stomach. She had tracked the killer, the 7-day killer, to this desolate beacon, a place steeped in history and shrouded in mystery. It was here, she knew, that he intended to enact his final, twisted act of revenge. The lighthouse loomed over the craggy coastline, its silhouette stark against the stormy sky. She imagined the countless shipwrecks that had claimed lives on these treacherous waters, the souls lost to the unforgiving sea, their stories forever etched in the salty air. The very walls seemed to whisper secrets, the echoes of tragedy echoing through the empty halls. The killer, a man named Thomas, had been a lighthouse keeper's assistant, a young boy haunted by the events that had unfolded decades ago. The lighthouse had been a place of joy and laughter, a sanctuary for a group of young people who worked there during the summers. But then, a tragic accident had taken their lives, leaving Thomas forever marked by the trauma. He had been consumed by grief and rage, blaming the victims for their own deaths. He had become obsessed with the lighthouse, seeing it as a symbol of his pain, a place where he could relive the tragedy over and over again. His revenge had become a macabre obsession, a twisted way to bring justice to a past he couldn't escape. Sarah's pursuit of Thomas had led her through a maze of deceit and darkness, a world where secrets lurked in the shadows, and justice was a fleeting illusion. She had seen the killer's handiwork, the chilling evidence of his crimes, and the pain he had inflicted on innocent lives. Now, as she stood in the heart of the lighthouse, she felt a chill crawl down her spine. She knew that Thomas was close, that their confrontation was inevitable. The silence was deafening, broken only by the relentless wind and the rhythmic pounding of the waves against the rocks below. Sarah's senses were heightened, her eyes scanning the shadows, her ears straining for any sound that might betray the killer's presence. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, his face hidden by the dim light. Thomas stood there, his eyes cold and calculating, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "Well, Sarah," he said, his voice a low growl, "it seems you finally found me." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Thomas," she said, her voice steady, "you need to stop this. What you're doing is wrong. There's no justice in revenge." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Justice," he spat. "You think I haven't thought about justice? You think I don't know how much they deserve to suffer? They took my life, my happiness. Now, they will pay." "They were victims, Thomas," Sarah countered. "They didn't deserve this. You need to let go of the past. You need to move on." He shook his head, his eyes blazing with anger. "I can't let go," he snarled. "I won't. They will pay for what they did. And you, Sarah, will pay for trying to stop me." He lunged at her, his fists clenched, his rage palpable. Sarah dodged out of the way, her reflexes honed by years of navigating dangerous situations. She knew that Thomas was a dangerous man, driven by a twisted sense of justice. She had to be careful, to use her wits and her skills to outsmart him, to survive this encounter. The chase was on, a deadly dance through the narrow corridors of the lighthouse. Thomas was relentless, his anger fueling his movements. Sarah was nimble and resourceful, her mind racing, searching for a way out of this deadly game. She knew that the lighthouse was a prison, a place where the past held her captive. But she also knew that it was a place where secrets could be unearthed, where the truth could finally be revealed. She had to find a way to escape Thomas's clutches, to expose his crimes, to bring him to justice. But she also knew that the lighthouse held a darkness that threatened to consume her, a darkness that could shatter her sense of reality and leave her lost in a labyrinth of madness. The chase led them through the winding staircase, the rickety floors groaning under their weight. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, her lungs burning from the exertion. She could hear Thomas's heavy breathing behind her, his rage a tangible force pushing her forward. They reached the top of the lighthouse, the lantern room where the beacon shone its light across the dark waters. The wind whipped around them, howling through the open space, a mournful cry that echoed Sarah's own desperation. The lantern room was a place of both beauty and danger, its windows framing a breathtaking view of the storm-tossed sea. But it was also a place of vulnerability, a place where Thomas could strike with deadly precision. He cornered her, his fists raised, his face contorted with rage. "It's over, Sarah," he hissed. "Your little game is over." Sarah felt the cold steel of his anger against her skin, the weight of his hatred pressing down on her. She knew that she was outmatched, that her strength was no match for his rage. But she refused to give in to despair. She had to fight for her life, for the victims he had taken, for the truth that still remained hidden in the shadows. Her eyes met his, her gaze unwavering. "No, Thomas," she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "It's not over. I won't let you win. I won't let you destroy everything." She took a deep breath, her mind racing, searching for a way out of this impossible situation. The lighthouse was a maze of shadows, a place where secrets were hidden and memories were buried. She needed to find a way to use this to her advantage. Her eyes fell on the lighthouse's mechanism, the complex system of gears and levers that powered the beacon. It was a fragile, intricate machine, a testament to the ingenuity of man. But it was also a weapon, a dangerous tool that could be used against the killer. With a sudden burst of energy, Sarah lunged at the mechanism, her hands fumbling for the levers. She knew that the lighthouse was designed to withstand the fiercest storms, but she also knew that the wrong move could set off a chain reaction, causing the entire structure to collapse. But she had no other choice. She had to gamble. She had to take a chance. She pulled the lever, feeling the gears grinding into motion. The lighthouse shuddered, the air filling with the clang of metal and the creak of aged wood. Thomas was caught off guard, his eyes widening in surprise. She saw her chance and took it. With a swift, powerful kick, she sent the mechanism into overdrive. The lighthouse groaned, the lantern spinning wildly, casting blinding beams of light across the sea. The force of the machine bucked against the killer, throwing him off balance. He stumbled back, his eyes filled with fear. He had never anticipated this, had never imagined that Sarah would turn his weapon against him. He was caught in the chaos he had created, trapped in a web of his own making. Sarah took advantage of his confusion, her body moving with a sudden burst of adrenaline. She dodged his lunges, her feet light and agile, her mind focused on her escape. She knew that the lighthouse was on the verge of collapse, that the walls were crumbling around them. But she also knew that this was her chance to escape, to bring the killer down, to end his reign of terror. She wouldn't let him win. She wouldn't let him take anything else from her. She pushed forward, her eyes locked on the exit, her body driven by a primal need to survive. The lighthouse groaned, the walls closing in on them, the air thick with the smell of decay and impending doom. But Sarah wouldn't give up. She wouldn't let the darkness consume her. She wouldn't let the killer claim victory. She pushed through the final doorway, the wind whipping at her back, the spray of the waves stinging her face. She emerged into the open air, her lungs burning, her muscles aching. She was free, but the nightmare was far from over. She had to find a way to stop Thomas, to end his reign of terror, to bring him to justice. She had to find a way to make sure that the lighthouse wouldn't claim another victim. She turned to see the lighthouse crumbling around her, the beacon spinning out of control, the light flashing across the turbulent sea. She had survived, but at a cost. The lighthouse was falling, its past catching up with it, its secrets spilling into the storm-tossed night. And as the lighthouse finally collapsed, Sarah knew that she had survived not just a physical battle, but a battle against the darkness within, a battle against the shadows that threatened to consume her. She had emerged from the darkness, but the scars of the experience would forever remain, a haunting reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil. The air hung heavy with the scent of salt and decay, the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks, a chilling counterpoint to the silence that had settled over the lighthouse. Sarah, her face etched with exhaustion, but her eyes burning with a fierce resolve, stood face to face with the man who had terrorized the city for weeks. The 7-day killer, his face a mask of twisted anger and despair, stood defiant, the weight of his crimes etched in the lines around his eyes. "It's over," Sarah said, her voice steady, a sharp contrast to the trembling of her hands. "You're finished." The killer laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound that echoed through the desolate tower. "Finished? No, Sarah. I'm just getting started. You see, this isn't about revenge. It's about justice." His words, laced with a chilling conviction, sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She had spent weeks unraveling the twisted tapestry of his crimes, piecing together the puzzle of his motives. His obsession with the lighthouse, his meticulous planning, the timing of the murders, it all pointed to a warped sense of justice, a desire to punish those he believed had wronged him. "Justice?" Sarah scoffed, disbelief coloring her voice. "You've murdered innocent people. How is that justice?" "They deserved it," he said, his voice hardening. "They took everything from me, my life, my happiness, my love." The lighthouse keeper's story was a tragedy, a tale of love, loss, and a bitter vendetta. He had loved one of the young women who had perished in the lighthouse accident decades ago. He believed that the others, those who had survived, were responsible for her death, their carelessness a betrayal of his love. "You think you can justify your actions by blaming others?" Sarah countered, her voice sharp. "You're responsible for your choices, for the pain you've caused." "Pain?" The killer's laughter echoed again, cruel and bitter. "They caused me pain, Sarah. They took my everything, and I took their everything in return." Sarah felt a wave of anger rise within her, a burning desire to see him brought to justice, to make him face the consequences of his actions. She had seen the fear in the eyes of the victims' families, the anguish etched on their faces. She knew the pain he had inflicted was real, the lives he had destroyed immeasurable. "You're not going to get away with this," she said, her voice a low growl. "The city won't let you." He chuckled, his gaze cold and calculating. "The city? The city is just a collection of broken souls, Sarah. They're afraid of me, of what I represent. They don't understand. They don't know the truth." Sarah knew he was right. The city was consumed by fear, a collective anxiety that had gripped its citizens. They had been living in a state of constant apprehension, dreading the next strike of the 7-day killer. But Sarah, in her relentless pursuit of justice, had brought the killer out of the shadows, forced him to confront his demons. "The truth?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of mockery. "The truth is that you're a murderer, a coward who hides behind a mask of twisted justifications." The killer lunged at her, his eyes blazing with a dark fire, his hands reaching for her throat. Sarah reacted instinctively, dodging the attack, her adrenaline pumping, her fear a cold hand clutching at her heart. She had faced danger before, had stared down the barrel of countless guns, but this was different. This was a confrontation with a man consumed by madness, a man fueled by a hatred so deep it seemed to seep into the very bones of the lighthouse. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. The killer was gaining ground, his movements swift and deliberate, his rage a palpable force. "It's over," Sarah breathed, her voice a whisper, her heart pounding in her ears. She had to find a way to stop him, to break his hold on her, to bring him to justice. The killer's hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around her arm, his grip like a vise. She fought back, her muscles burning with exertion, but his strength was overwhelming. The room spun, the light flickered, and she felt a surge of despair. He had her. He was going to finish what he had started. But then, a sudden shift in the air. A rustling of leaves, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. The sound of sirens, a distant wail growing louder with every second. The killer's face twisted with surprise, his grip loosening as the sound pierced the eerie silence. He turned, his eyes searching the darkness, his fear a flicker of recognition. The police. They had arrived. It was over. Sarah, her body trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps, watched as the killer's face contorted in a mix of rage and despair. He had been cornered, his game over, his reign of terror finally ending. "It's over," Sarah said, her voice weak but firm. "It's over." He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a hatred so intense it could melt steel. He knew he was defeated, his dream of revenge shattered. The city, with its flickering lights and the distant sound of sirens, seemed to be breathing again. But even as the police swarmed the lighthouse, Sarah felt a lingering chill, a sense of unease that refused to dissipate. She had brought the killer to justice, but the darkness he had unleashed, the fear he had sown in the hearts of the city's residents, would linger long after he was gone. The city would heal, but the scars, the echoes of the 7-day killer would remain, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface, a darkness that could erupt at any moment, shattering the fragile peace. The moment of truth had arrived, but it was a truth that held no solace, a truth that revealed a city haunted by its demons, a city forever scarred by the 7-day killer. The city of Willow Creek breathed a collective sigh of relief. The 7-day killer, the phantom who had stalked their streets, leaving a trail of chilling brutality in his wake, was finally apprehended. The nightmare was over. The streets were safe again. The clockwork precision of the killer's attacks, his calculated timing, and the meticulously chosen victims, all fueled the fear and paranoia that had gripped the city for weeks. But now, the city was free. Yet, beneath the veneer of relief, a lingering unease persisted. The echoes of the killer's deeds, the chilling images of the victims, and the sense of vulnerability that had been so deeply ingrained in the city's psyche remained. The city had been marked, and the scars wouldn't fade easily. Sarah, the journalist who had tirelessly pursued the truth, was a living testament to the enduring impact of the 7-day killer's reign of terror. The case had consumed her, pulling her into a dark abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. The relentless investigation, the constant threat of danger, and the terrifying confrontation with the killer had etched themselves into her soul. The city's relief felt hollow. The apprehension of the killer had brought a semblance of peace. But Sarah knew that it was a fragile peace. The darkness she had witnessed, the depths of human depravity she had plumbed, were still etched in her memory. She was haunted by the faces of the victims, their silent pleas echoing in her ears. The killer's motives, his twisted logic, and the chilling details of his crimes were a constant reminder of the terrifying fragility of life. The killer, a man named Daniel, had been a seemingly ordinary lighthouse keeper, harboring a dark secret, a festering wound from his past. He had been consumed by a thirst for vengeance, driven by a tragedy that had occurred at the lighthouse decades ago. His targets had been the innocent survivors of that tragedy, victims of his warped perception of justice. Sarah had faced Daniel in the heart of the lighthouse, the very place where his twisted vendetta had taken root. The confrontation had been a harrowing experience, a desperate fight for survival in the face of sheer, unadulterated evil. It had been a fight not only for her life, but for the city's soul. As she stood in the interrogation room, watching Daniel confess to his crimes, a strange sense of emptiness washed over Sarah. Justice had been served. The killer was behind bars, yet the victory felt bittersweet. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of what might come next, that haunted her. It was the realization that even in the face of triumph, the darkness remained. The city of Willow Creek had survived the ordeal, but Sarah knew that the scars would remain. The victims, their families, and the city's collective psyche were irrevocably altered. Sarah, too, had been marked by the experience. The nightmares were a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. She knew that she could never truly escape the shadows of the 7-day killer. She could never fully erase the images of the victims from her mind, the chilling details of the crimes from her memory. But she was determined to use her experience, her understanding of the darkness, to help others, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Sarah had lost something in the process, a part of her innocence, a piece of her peace of mind. But she had also gained something, a deeper understanding of human nature, a greater awareness of the darkness that could reside within us all. As she walked away from the interrogation room, the city of Willow Creek bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. She felt a sense of purpose. She knew that the battle against darkness was never ending, a constant struggle to bring light to the shadows. And she was ready to fight. Days later, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of the cliff overlooking the lighthouse, the place where the nightmare had begun, where Daniel had unleashed his vengeance. The lighthouse, once a beacon of hope, now stood as a stark reminder of the darkness that can dwell in the hearts of men. The air was crisp, the wind whispering through the tall pines. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. The lighthouse stood against the backdrop, a stark silhouette against the fiery sky, a symbol of the city's resilience, of its ability to survive even the darkest of times. Sarah had come to the lighthouse seeking closure, hoping to find a sense of peace. But as she looked out at the turbulent ocean, its surface mirroring the turmoil in her soul, she realized that there was no closure, no easy answer. The 7-day killer had left an indelible mark on her, a chilling reminder that the darkness could lurk in the most unexpected places, that it could claim even the most innocent of victims. She knew that the fight against darkness was never truly over, that it was a constant struggle, a battle waged on multiple fronts. And she was determined to continue fighting, to use her experience to shine a light on the darkness, to expose the shadows and bring hope to those who had been left behind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Sarah turned and walked away from the lighthouse, leaving behind the ghosts of the past, the memories of the victims, and the chilling reminder of the darkness that had so deeply shaken the city of Willow Creek. She had found her purpose, her path. She was not just a journalist anymore. She was a guardian of the light, a protector against the shadows. She would continue to fight, to expose the truth, and to bring solace to those who had lost their way in the darkness.